Welcome to the Adventure Story Podcast. First, let me take 20 seconds to tell you about my new book. What if we've been looking for Atlantis in the wrong place? When an archaeologist dies protecting an impossible secret, her final message sends Eden Black racing into the Sahara to find an ancient crystal encoded with the knowledge of a lost civilization. It's the power that once turned a paradise into a wasteland. From high-speed chases through Marrakesh to an underground chamber older than recorded history, Eden must face a rogue scientist determined to use the crystal to reshape the world. Last time it awakened, the Sahara was born. This time, it could end everything. The Sahara Event is the 7th in my Eden Black archaeological thriller series. Search for the Sahara Event by me, Luke Richardson, wherever you get your adventures. Right, let's get on with the episode. From the icy edges of the Arctic to the roaring crowds of the 1939 World's Fair, James Richardson's novel The Valhalla Key drops us into a world of secret legends, shadowy agents, and golden age adventure. But what inspired this epic thrill ride through both history and myth? Is there truth in the fiction? And what's the story, as always, behind the adventure? Hey, I'm Luke. I'm an author of archaeological adventure novels. I travelled the world looking for stories to put into my books and to share with you right here on the Adventure Story Podcast. Now, James Richardson is the author of pulse-pounding historical thrillers that blend golden age adventure with modern action, sending readers from the shadowy streets of 1930s New York to ancient temples and Arctic ruins. A real-life explorer with a degree in archaeology, he's trekked jungles, climbed volcanoes, and visited nearly 40 countries in search of inspiration. James, I'm excited to speak with you. Welcome.
Thanks for having me here. It's really exciting.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to this conversation. So, The Valhalla Key, your novel we're talking about today. Why did you choose specifically the period of time that you did, 1939, that late 30s period?
So it kind of developed purely from sort of inspiration from my old route into work years ago, where I used to walk on this route pretty much every day, and there was this busker, and he called himself the Crooked Crooner. He has some sort of spinal disease or something, but he had this absolutely amazing voice, and there were always sort of these sort of massive crowds around him, and he was there pumping out all the old tunes, like the old Rat Pack stuff with Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, Come Fly With Me and The Way You Look Tonight and Here's to Losers, that sort of stuff. And that was never sort of my music. I was sort of never sort of followed that sort of music before, but he just really, really captured your attention, and he'd play the trombone or the trumpet and sort of voice to die for. And so every time I walked past him, I'd be tapping my feet and humming, and be these earworms stuck in my head all day. And I don't know, from there it just started sort of daydreaming, I guess, into this sort of idea of this sort of big casino, sort of these shady mobsters, and your crooked sort of PI characters and beautiful singers and shady cops, and but I kind of had this sort of idea in my head of this being really classy and sophisticated, rather than a lot of gangster movies, which were always really gritty and hard hitting. I sort of sat on that for years before I sort of started writing, and then one day, just on a whim, just kind of sat down, started writing out this idea of this PI sort of tied to his steering wheel, without giving too much away. But that's how we meet Jax, who's the main character, and these sort of dodgy gangsters around him, and it just sort of developed naturally from there. And as I started looking into it and developing it a bit more and working up the idea of it actually being an archaeological thriller, 1939 just sort of seemed like a really, really good fit. It kind of fit all those sort of mobsters and gangster elements, but it still had this sort of sense of adventure. And then I guess the other thing as well is, 1939 is, arguably one of the most pivotal moments in human history, with the outbreak, or a terrible outbreak, obviously, of World War II. I really quite like that idea of this sort of bigger world and these things that are going to happen, that these characters can't escape from. But they're sort of thrust into these situations where they're trying to control destiny, but you kind of know as the reader that war is going to break out. Whereas a lot of our sort of genre, always the hero saves the day and sort of saves World War III from breaking out. Hopefully, kind of like that idea of almost a bit of a tragedy that no matter how hard they try, World War II is going to be breaking out very soon.
It's interesting stories like that, isn't it? When the reader is, and this must be a great thing of writing historically, is that the reader is more aware than the characters. We know what's coming. We know that, at the end of that book or somewhere near the end of that book, that news is going to come, that in a way their mission isn't successful, right? Because the war breaks out anyway. We know that that's history. Talking about the setting sort of physically rather than in time based, you start the novel starts in New York, as you've mentioned. You visit all sorts of places, from the World's Fair that was in New York at that time to Niagara Falls to the Arctic. It's got a real great diverse cast of settings as well as characters. How did you research these places, and what sort of challenges did you have in that some of them are very far away, some of them are very different now? How did you do that? How did you make that work?
Yeah, you're right. It was quite a massive challenge, sort of perhaps bigger than I had anticipated beforehand. I used to, when I first started sort of writing, which is very much like writing fan fiction, if you like, it was very sort of sci-fi orientated, so it was so easy. You just, picture something in your head and that's that. And even to a certain degree, writing modern thrillers, I've been lucky enough to sort of traveled and seen a lot of the world, and so again, you can sort of fairly easily sort of transplant your experiences and what you've seen, look back at your old holiday photos, that sort of thing, and develop the story from there. But yeah, you're quite right. When all of a sudden I came across these things, and they're, again, like I said earlier, they're recognizable, but they're different. So Niagara Falls, for instance, is totally different today. I mean, maybe not the shape of the physical falls and stuff, but what's around it. Now you've got loads and loads of tourist stuff. Back then they still had lots of tourist stuff, but it's very different. And you had these crazy like daredevils walking across on tight ropes, which, health and safety, I'm pretty sure, would not allow that to happen these days. And people going over the falls in barrels and all these sort of crazy things. Like, even I've never been to Niagara Falls, but even if I went to Niagara Falls, I don't think I would have been able to research those elements of it. And the World's Fair, like you mentioned, I mean, I really, really loved that sort of writing that section in the World's Fair. It was just this crazy sort of wonderland, if you like. But there's no website. I couldn't just go and find the World's Fair website online and get some snippets of information to build my scene out of. So it took me ages and ages going through finding mainly images, like on Google Images, of an old program that someone has scanned in, sort of some of them even handwritten, and trying to sort of go through all this text to try and work out what was there and where things were. And I found a map. It was like not an animated map, but like a drawing of the World's Fair with the different zones, then images sort of dotted on it. And it took me ages sort of going through and trying to work it out, and where I could put my fictional setting, and there's a bit of a chase scene in it, and how that could unfold. So yeah, it's still relying very much on the internet, but not on the tools that it might have relied on previously, like Google Earth and Google Maps and that sort of stuff. The Niagara Falls we were saying about, I actually wrote a scene in the very, very first draft where the heroes have to get across the US-Canadian border, and they go on they go across a bridge initially. And then I discovered that this bridge I'd written all this scene on wasn't actually built till the 1960s. And I was like, okay, go back to the drawing board on that one. And it's same with like New York. The skyline is so instantly recognizable. You say New York City to anyone, and you immediately conjure up like this, I don't know, the beginning of Friends or something like that. But the skyline was so different back in 1939, and it's really difficult to not just immediately jump in and write what you know. You've really, really got to double check absolutely everything you're writing.
Yes, and make sure it sort of fits together, because as you say, putting that bridge in there when there wasn't a bridge at that time and for the next 40 years, it just feels slightly disingenuous, doesn't it, to have that and to make that happen. I mean, you have worked you work in the sort of field of archaeology anyway, don't you? So did you use skills that you've used in that sort of field to research the book?
Yeah. So yeah, I've got a degree in archaeology, and I work in a museum. So yeah, I've done a lot of research in my time. So yeah, definitely sort of factored those sort of things into it. Unfortunately, because obviously I live in England, I've got in the museum I work with, there's access to loads of amazing historical records and stuff, but they're all local history, or at least British history. So it didn't help me that much with that. But the concepts of researching, I suppose it's taking it into slightly more of an academic type research level, because you can't just sort of wash away sort of something you get wrong. And if I've got anything wrong in it that anyone ever, a reader ever picks up on, you just got to put your hands up and take it on the nose and be like, oh yes, I got that wrong, thanks for pointing that out. Because I'm not a historian in that sense.
Yeah, I find that with my books as well, because whilst they are not historical, they're set in the modern day, they do relate to historical facts because they're archaeological thrillers. You're balancing, aren't you? You're really trying to balance the whole time between the truth and the great story, I suppose. But you also go into the Norse legends in this story, which I love the way you tied New York and gangsters and PIs and that sort of. I've got a vision of that character from stories in those genres, like Mike Hammer and Raymond Chandler and those sorts of guys. But you tied it into Norse legends as well, which is fantastic. How did you go about that? Are these things real? Are these things something you've looked up, or are these something that you have taken a bit of a creative license with, I suppose?
Yeah, so kind of a balance of both, I suppose. So we write archaeological thrillers, but in some ways I kind of think of certainly this one almost as a mythological thriller, in that there's a lot of, like, say, the Norse mythology that filters through to it. The majority of what's featured in the Valhalla key is based on actual Norse mythology, but obviously mythology itself is a story that has been told and retold and elaborated and changed throughout the years. So I think you're allowed a little bit of poetic license to adapt a bit of the mythology to fit your own needs, which I imagine has probably been done by storytellers and bards and stuff for centuries or millennia. When it comes to the actual, like, archaeology of it, my story, it's in the title, the Valhalla key. It sort of centers around this idea of key, and as far as I know, no one's found a physical place called Valhalla, even though the concept of Valhalla is arguably sort of linked to great halls of sort of Norse chieftains and leaders from many years ago. But the keys have been found in Viking burials and Norse burials, but they're really, really sort of hard to come by. They've only found something like about 100 keys in burials out of about 8,000 burials that have been excavated. So there's this idea of maybe they were sort of status symbols. They show that you were someone very important. And then the idea of unlocking kind of comes really a lot into Norse mythology, sort of. The stories about getting into hell, which is not hell like the Christian sense of it, but still the Norse underworld, is in one L instead of two. But you couldn't just sort of wander in there when you died. You had to go through sort of various processes to sort of unlock the way into hell. Like Odin, for instance, who's the main god, he unlocked knowledge. He unlocked the secret of the runes by hanging from Yggdrasil, excuse the pronunciation, which is the world tree. By drinking from a me as well, he unlocked like cosmic knowledge. So this locking and unlocking and keys and stuff is kind of this sort of element that filters through a lot of Norse sort of mythology and stories. So yeah, I found that really, really fascinating. I just love how fantastical they are. Out of all the sort of myths and legends you can read and discover around the world, these are really almost Tolkienian sort of myths. I can kind of picture sort of giant statues of Odin and Thor and whatever.
I love that. I do. And it's one of the things that I think we're very lucky to be able to do in our writing, is tie together these strands that perhaps really have no business being tied together, but we do so just for our own amusement and hopefully the amusement of our readers. And you have tied in a third strand here, which is the Nazis' obsession with occult artifacts and their want to reach Valhalla, to use Valhalla for their own ends, which I suppose ties into the period of time that you that you set the book. What history did you use in that? Because we've heard about the Nazis' obsession with sort of occult things, but I never quite know how far to believe that.
I was really shocked. Like you say, it's kind of like it's been done. Indiana Jones, they're the main villains in Indiana Jones, and in dozens of different books and TV series and movies, the Nazis are trying to find some occult power to further their war machine, and even sort of modern day Nazis in some stories sort of doing the same. But it's true, and that's the most shocking thing about it. You think it's sort of Hollywoodized, but the more I delved into it, and even taking some of it that you find online with a pinch of salt, they really, really did invest a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of resources into developing. They call them Wunderweapons, which I'm sure is a terrible pronunciation, especially from someone who I believe you're learning German. But wonder weapons, and some of them are sort of based on science and technology, and you can actually see evidence of them, like the V2 rocket and the first ever jet plane, the Messerschmitt. I forget what it was, the Me-62 or something like that, which is the world's first operational jet plane, and they were classed as these wonder weapons. But then sort of myth and the occult and stuff sort of factored into it as well. There's something called vril energy, which apparently they became quite obsessed with, but it's actually based on 19th century literature. It appeared in fictional stories, but they became almost obsessed with harnessing this vril energy to develop super weapons. And there was something called Die Glock, which again, it's that terrible German pronunciation, but is basically the bell, which I've heard of before, and you might have come across. Yeah, and that supposedly, I think, so from what I can gather, no one really knows exactly what the bell was supposed to do, but there's links to sort of time travel or anti-gravity and that sort of stuff. And it was supposedly sort of powered by occult sort of initiation rituals and stuff. And so it's just really shocking. It's things like the Spear of Destiny. Apparently, Hitler himself was obsessed with trying to find the Spear of Destiny that pierced the side of Christ on the cross, and finding Atlantis, and all these things that I've read about these ideas, but the more I actually researched them, I was like, they actually did that. It's not just for show. So I kind of sort of feel like some of the bits I added into the Valhalla key, that when I first started writing, I thought, maybe it's a bit far fetched. Like, no, it's not actually. I could probably elaborate on it more if I wanted to. So.
Oh, I think that's fantastic, and there's so much to unpick there, isn't there? In my writing, I haven't gone down that route yet, because as you say, they're the villain in a lot of stories, and quite rightly so, because they're very villainous people with lots of villainous sort of aims. But yeah, you use that well, and I like the way you play that in. To bring us back to sort of terra firma, to bring us back to solid ground, where did this love of adventure come from? What's your relationship with adventure? Do you seek these thrills yourself? You've mentioned your background in archaeology, working in a museum. I've got these images of you messing around with artifacts every day, or do you do this, or do you sort of live vicariously through the characters that you invent?
So I'd say these days it's more vicariously through my characters, because I'm now a father with two children, so two young sons, so a little bit more restricted on some of the activities I can do or want to do, putting yourself in dangerous situations. But certainly not that long ago, I love adventure. I love going off. I love exploring the world, which I know you do as well. And going certainly beyond like your package holidays and that sort of stuff. And I sort of trekked through the Aruana River, which is part of the Amazon basin, and sort of came across like anacondas and caimans, piranhas, things like that. And sort of canyoning in the Andes in Ecuador, I think it was, and sort of jump off this waterfall that was like 25 meters tall and just free jump off it, and sort of these sort of crazy things which I probably wouldn't do now. Now I've got kids, but certainly at the time it was great. And diving, love diving. In Fiji, went diving with sharks and stuff. And one of my favourite memories is it was actually my honeymoon, and managed to drag my wife along on this little adventure with this bit of a dodgy looking supposed tour guide who sort of took us through this big patch of jungle in Guatemala, and then we had to climb down this sort of limestone cliff face, way through this river, and to this cliff. Sorry, to this cave. But the only way to get in there, you had to dive under and swim through this submerged passage. Came up on the other side, and we walked for, I don't know, about an hour or so, climbing through potholes and up this big steep ramp. And at the top, it was a proper like adventure moment. Like at the top was all these urns and jars, and even some skeletons that were part of a Mayan human sacrifice from years ago. And uh, it was just like proper, like, yeah, like an Indiana Jones moment. I just sort of love that sort of sense of adventure.
That is fantastic. I can see that in one of your books. The swimming through the tunnel, and I mean, I've written scenes like that, and yeah, they're just so enigmatic of the genre, aren't they? That sort of undiscovered cave, undiscovered tomb, whatever it might be. So in this book, it's branded as, and I love this, it's branded as having the golden age adventure charm. What does that mean to you? What do you mean by that? And how did you capture the classic adventure sort of theme in this story?
Well, I guess the golden age adventure charm to me is things like the stories of Hiram Bingham when he found Machu Picchu, and Howard Carter opening Tutankhamun's tomb, and that sort of stuff, and Colonel Fawcett going on his expedition to find the lost city of Zed. And I don't know, I don't even know if the golden age of adventure is an identifiable period of time, but certainly I think by 1939 is coming towards the end of it, where the maps are being filled in a bit more, and almost the world's getting a bit smaller. Some elements of travel are getting a little bit easier. Aeroplanes are starting to become something you can travel to other countries in a few days, certainly not a few hours, but not necessarily a few weeks that had taken not long before. And so you got that element of adventure and excitement, where every journey is part of the adventure, and it's not like just sitting there and saying, "Oh, my characters went from A to B," and then the adventure continues. It's like that A to B is part of the adventure, and they have to rely on their own wits and their own cunning and their own knowledge. They can't just whip out the smartphone and Google the answer to a riddle, or sort of get out digital maps, or use lidar and sonar and these sort of things. So I guess that's sort of what I mean by the golden age of adventure. So not having that backup, I guess, and to sort of feed it into the book.
It's so true. I when I write, one of the challenges I have is stopping, and I said this on the podcast episode last week, is stopping people just using their phone to find the answer, or put a tracker on the thing. Like, how many times do they just put a tracker on the thing and that's the end of it? It's so boring, isn't it, as a reader, for them just to be doing it's solved by the same technological thing. And you want them to use some initiative or some sort of old school spycraft to fix the thing instead. If you could go on one real world adventure then that's related specifically to this book, you've talked about trekking in jungles and climbing mountains and stuff, but specifically related to this book, what would that be? And I'm not sure if you're allowed time travel or not in your answer. I think I'll leave that open to you to.
Yeah, okay. I would have said going to the Arctic, which features in the book, because that's always been a bit of a dream of mine. But we actually did it a few months ago. Went up to finished Lapland, and in sort of minus 33 degrees temperatures and stuff. So saw the Northern Lights, and that was a fantastic experience. So seen Niagara Falls. I'd love to go and see Niagara Falls. I'd actually like to go. So what's really silly is most of the stuff I've written in the past is always based on places I've been. This one, actually, I've not been to New York City. I've not been to Niagara Falls. I have now been to the Arctic. Um, but if I'm allowed time travel, I think the place I'd really, really love to go and see would be, of all places, the World's Fair. Because I just think, uh, these days we're so almost immune to big tech sort of rolling out their latest invention, and the latest thing that AI can do, and the latest smartphone and wearable gadget and that sort of stuff. But to the people in 1939, some of the stuff at the World's Fair, which was branded as a glimpse into the world of tomorrow, and it was so futuristic. They had a kitchen that talked to you, and like quite chauvinistically, that was supposedly going to give wives more to attend to their husbands. that sort of stuff. And they had all these technological marvels, sort of cityscapes and dioramas showing what the world was going to be looking like, and all glass skyscrapers, and lots of it didn't come to pass. Some of it did. They even had an actual giant walking robot who could talk. And walk around, and he could even smoke, which I don't think you get away with at Disneyland these days. But the people who went to that fair, they must have been like mind blown, like really, really. I don't think there'd be that much these days that we could see if we went to a fair that you'd be really shockingly sort of mind blown at. Even if you saw a robot, you might go, "That's really cool," but I've seen that on TV or on YouTube or something. But I'd love to experience that sense of wonder and excitement that they must have felt when they saw these things. So I think, yeah, one place would be the World's Fair.
That's a lovely answer. I like that. And I suppose it's that coming together of the creative countries, isn't it, that did that? Wasn't the Eiffel Tower built for one of the World's Fairs? Am I understanding? I don't know if that's correct, but they decided to keep it. It was built as a temporary exhibition, and they left it in the end.
Possibly, yeah.
I'm going to have to look that up before I look like an idiot and say it one way or the other. But yeah, I think that's a really, really lovely answer. And yeah, I think you're right that perhaps all of the leaps in engineering we see are sort of, we're used to them, aren't we? We're used to that sort of, they're incremental is what I'm saying. Nothing is like, boom. No. If someone bought a teleportation device or something, you'd be like, yeah,
that's like
cool.
Might, yeah.
Or I don't know, whatever the thing was that was literally like 100 years into the future.
Yeah. It'd have to be really sci-fi, I think, to shock us now, wouldn't it?
It would. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Right. Final question then. I ask this to everyone on the podcast. I love it. It's one of my favorite ones. Looking back, what adventure stories, whether they're books, whether they're movies, whether they're legends, whether they're something that a family member told you, whatever it might be, first sparked your imagination and made you want to go out and see the world and then write about it in your adventure stories?
Indiana Jones, without doubt. I got this sort of great memory of watching, I think it was Temple of Doom when I was, I don't know, 7 or 8, and just thinking, oh wow, that's a proper adventure. And I remember jumping around the house with my granddad's old hat. I think it was a trilby or something, certainly not a fedora, and it had checkered patterns on it, so it looked like a proper old man's hat, but it still felt Indiana Jones enough. And I remember jumping around with a piece of string or wool and reenacting that, and just thinking that was great. But also my dad used to tell me all these stories about, he loved the old Tarzan stories, Edgar Rice Burroughs, isn't it? And I remember sort of watching sort of some of them, which really cheesy and corny by today's standards, and watching things like the old The Lost World, where they had like iguanas, standing in for dinosaurs, like blown up, using not computer imagery, but clever filming techniques and that sort of stuff. And again, it was that sense of going on an adventure, and they almost sort of, I guess they were about Victorian times, weren't they? Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, that sort of stuff. So yeah, I love all of those. And things like books. I love the Hunt for Atlantis by Andy McDermott. That one, I mean, I've read all of his Nina Wilde and Eddie Chase series, but I think that one in particular really gets this nice blend of like Indiana Jones crossed with James Bond, and love that. More recently, I got guilty pleasure, which probably I can't sort of say inspired me to go traveling, but certainly makes me long to go to some places, is the Fast and Furious saga, which me and my wife, we watch pretty much like once a year. We sort of sit down, and we just finished watching them like last weekend. We watched the final one so far. But again, just when you see them in like Havana and Rio and Berlin and all these places in Tokyo, and you think, oh yeah, they've got a real fun, bombastic sense of adventure to them again. So,
James, that's absolutely fantastic. Thanks so much for joining me. So, if a New York PI racing Nazis to stop an ancient Norse relic from unleashing Ragnarok on the eve of World War II sounds like something right up your street, sounds like something you'd like to read, search for The Valhalla Key by James Richardson on your favourite bookstore. That's The Valhalla Key by James Richardson on your favourite bookstore. This is the Adventure Story podcast. Thank you so much for hanging out today. It's great to spend some time with you. If you've enjoyed the show, please subscribe, please like, and please share. It'll take you just seconds, but really helps me spread the word about this show. If you have a story you'd like me to explore, let me know in the comments or on hello@lukerichardsonauthor.com via the email. That's good too. And if you need more adventure in your life, and let's be honest, who doesn't, you might like to join the Adventure Society. This weekly newsletter is your ticket to travel with me, to share real-world adventures and find out when a new story or a new season of this podcast drops. It's lukerichardsonauthor.com/Adventure Society is where you need to go for that one. And if you're a fan of adventure stories like the ones we've talked about today, check out my books at lukerichardsonauthor.com. Thanks so much, bon voyage, enjoy the adventure, and I'll see you next time.